Bon après-midi à tous et bienvenue à cette audience du comité de dérogation pour la ville d'Ottawa. Est-ce qu'il y a un écho dans la salle? OK, on est correct. Okay, welcome everyone to this hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the City of Ottawa, Panel 1 Urban. S'il y en a qui aimeraient avoir les consignes en français, vous n'avez rien qu'à me donner signe, puis ça va me faire plaisir de répéter les consignes en français. So we are a City of Ottawa quasi-judicial tribunal that holds public hearings to consider Planning Act applications, including minor variances and consents to sever land. Our hearings are back to being in person for a year now. However, the committee can enable remote participation and has done so successfully. All you need to do, if you're new to the process, is to request through committee staff to be registered as a speaker, then you will be speaking remotely. We are live streaming on YouTube, and the video will be archived and available for future viewing by the public on the committee's website. My name is Anne Tremblay, and I will be chairing today's hearing. With me are my fellow panel members, and I'd like to welcome, in fact, two members from panel 2. First, Member Wright, and also Member McLean, and with us, as always, is Member Keklikan, and online we have Member Coakley. So we have our full panel today. So in terms of procedure, you've seen the agenda, and the agenda is, there's no magic to it. We in fact will change the order based on how quickly we can get through some items and whether or not there's adjournments and the like. So so that won't necessarily be in exactly the order that you saw on the agenda. So note that the panel members have reviewed all of the materials related to the applications before us today, including the planning reports and any submissions in support or in opposition. What we really want to hear today, in addition to the materials that we have, is the oral submissions, and we look forward to hearing from our speakers, registered and not registered. So as part of the statutory public notification requirements, each applicant is required to post a sign on the property in question before the hearing. They also are required to confirm in writing that they did so, or we can either alternatively swear or affirm through an oath that they've fulfilled the sign posting. If we don't get either, then we have to postpone that hearing. So Madam Deputy Secretary Treasurer, can you just confirm that we have them all in?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have them all in except for item number 3, Preston Street.
All right, thank you for that. All right, so with that, then the panel may ask for a brief presentation from you, followed by questions to the applicant, and we'll also call upon city staff, planning staff, sometimes forestry. We will then hear from members of the public, starting with those on our speakers list. But anyone who has an interest in any of the applications can speak. All you need to do is to let me know, and we'll invite you down to speak with us or online. So what we would ask is that you address your comments to me as the chair, starting with your name and spelling if necessary, and your municipal address for the record. All presentations are limited to 5 minutes, and any exceptions are at my discretion. At the end of the hearing on an application, the panel may either make an oral decision or we may reserve our decision. And in the latter case, the committee's decision will not be delivered during the course of the hearing. We will make a decision today. I can promise you, we don't leave this room until all applications have a decision one way or the other. However, and you should know that in all cases and within 10 days, the Committee of Adjustment will send an official written decision and reasons for it to all parties, participant, and anyone who has requested a copy of that decision. So now we have a couple of items of business. So first off, declarations of conflict of interest. Anyone on our panel for any of the agenda items on ours or panels 2 or 3? Seeing none, there are no declarations of conflict of interest for the record. We have no minutes to approve, so we're going to go straight to the adjournment requests. We have one, which is for application number 3 for 482 Preston Street, looking for Mr. Yakachuk. Is he online?
Yes, he's online.
Hello?
Hi, we can hear you, but we can't see you.
Oh, apologies.
Hello.
Good afternoon, Chair.
All right, so we're going to need from you the reasons for the adjournment request.
Sure. So while we can support the application as it stands right now on the 4 tests and the planning policy framework, due to the community outreach that has been forwarded to us, as well as conversations with the councilor's staff, we're requesting the adjournment to look into some of the comments the community has brought to us. In our conversations with Councillor Trust, her staff has suggested that they would help us look into any potential bylaw infractions on or in the area, and we're requesting 2 weeks to satisfy that and look into it.
All right, thank you. So from the audience, please, I don't appreciate those kinds of call outs. So just, if you want to speak later, then just let me know and we'll bring it down and you can make some comments. So with that then, Mr. Yakachuk, I'm glad to hear that you are going to reach out to the community because we did in fact receive a lot of concerns from the neighbors. But I also have another item that I need to raise with you, and that is the fact that it looks like you're adding a minor variance, which was not on the original notice. So the committee is proposing that we in fact adjourn you sine die. Are you right with that?
We would prefer that not be the case. We've spoken with city staff about 2 weeks ago, where they suggested that that wouldn't be necessary to do so. That is within. Sorry, perhaps city staff can speak to our correspondence.
No, so Mr. Yakachuk, we are aware that planning staff has not raised the need for recirculation on this, but based on how the committee has proceeded in the past with other requests, we don't add on the floor any minor variances. Those need to, for fullness of public information and transparency, we want to ensure that there's in fact a new notice circulated with that minor variance, and we consider that to be in fact perhaps the 4th minor variance. So that is essentially the committee's position on this. So we're going to adjourn you sine die and give you the opportunity to have that recirculation and invite you to speak with committee staff if you have any questions about that. So with that, looking to see if there's anyone who has questions with regards to the adjournment sine die. Come on up. Come on up. So we're going to need your name and your full municipal address, please. Sorry, got to get your microphone going.
This one? My name is Emily Hanlon, Hanlon. I live at 93 Adeline Street. I don't know what that means, and I'm wondering, I'm one of the people that was organizing in opposition of this. We all took time off of work to come here to make our opposition known. I'd like to know exactly what's happening, have it all spelled out, please. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I'm glad you've raised that. It's not, these are terms that we use all the time, but I can certainly understand where you need that clarification. So sine die essentially means that we're not adjourning to any particular date. What we flagged here is that the notice went out to the public that said, here are the minor variances that are requested. However, in reviewing the application, planning staff has identified that there's in fact another variance with regards to the height of the screen. So under the Planning Act, what needs to happen in those situations is that we need to recirculate it because we need to ensure that the public has full knowledge of all of what's being requested on an application. So that's why we'd like to do a sine die. Gives the opportunity for the applicant in this case, not only to revise their notice and get it back out to circulation, but it also affords them more time to have discussions with the neighbors. And that's what I understand Mr. Yakachuk said that they would do as part of this process. And then, the other benefit there for everyone is if there are other minor variances that come forward on the basis of any redesign that might come out of discussions, then that can be added to the new notice and recirculated at the same time. So it's an advantage.
May I ask a follow-up, please?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Does that mean that we need to show up again? And is the information that we've provided previously going to be taken into consideration for the next one? Because we spent many hours of our own time unpaid organizing to consult with our neighbors and engage with them when the applicant did not.
Yes, so I believe the information, I'm going to look to our secretary treasurer to confirm this, but I believe that all that material is retained and it is brought back, like forwarded to the date of the new hearing, whenever that is. What I can tell you is that because it's going to recirculation, typically we ask for 6 weeks. So that would put us into literally probably the mid-June meeting. If they got through the process very quickly and did all the consultation, then that would probably be about the time frame we'd be looking at. But I'm just going to look for confirmation from our Deputy Secretary Treasurer.
That's correct, Madam Chair. So all the comments we received for this round would carry forward to the new hearing date. There's no need to resubmit documents you've already submitted. You are welcome, though, to submit new information. It's totally up to you, but the committee will have access to all your comments submitted so far.
Any further questions?
Not for me, thank you.
Okay, anybody else want to speak to the adjournment? Remember, folks, it's the adjournment we're talking about here. We're not talking about the merits of the application in one way or the other. Okay? Your name and your municipal address, please.
Hi, my name is Kayla Morrow. Municipal address is 122 Pamela Street. In regards to the adjournment, as you may have read from all of us, this the owner of the property has gone ahead with these parties despite the condition that they not do so. If we're adjourning indefinitely into June, July, what recourse do we have as neighbors when these events go forward despite the condition that they not?
That would be through our bylaw enforcement. So you need to reach out to 311 and find, I'm sure they'll be able to direct you to whomever you should be talking to. It's a very valid concern. So do reach out if that's something the group wants to do.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I just want to point out a loophole to the committee if possible, that bylaw does not uphold that condition. It's not within their jurisdiction, and property standards who could uphold that, they can't uphold that as they work 9 to 5. So we're in a very difficult position as residents of the area. Just wanted to bring that to your attention, and thank you.
Well, thank you for doing that, because we do get a chance to meet on occasion with city staff and to ask questions like this. So we can be sure to ask them how they do manage the requirements on patios, because, you know, we're just heading into patio season. So this is maybe just the first of a number of applications. So thank you for bringing that forward.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anyone else? Come on forward. And your name and municipal address.
Hi, my name is Stefan Schmidt, and I'm at 93 Adeline Street. And I understand the adjournment because of the new minor variance. That makes sense. But I guess I'd like to put on the record my opposition to the adjournment that the applicant requested in terms of consultation with the community. There's been ample time for the applicant to do so. And in fact, we reached out specifically to the applicant more than 6 months ago, as have others over the course of last year and earlier this year, to discuss our concerns. And you know, within this 10-day period, which we had to organize, there was ample opportunity for the applicant to discuss the concerns that we've had over those times, and has failed to do so. So I just like to have that noted and provide my opposition to the adjournment on that basis. And I think it also goes to the applicant's behavior generally, that you know, when we do get around to talking on the merits, I think that would feed into that discussion. So I don't know if, I assume this will be on the record, and this information could be you know, pointed to at a later date.
Yeah, so good that you did raise that. So now we know what your expectations are, and the consultant understands what your expectations are with regards to better consultation. So it's unfortunate that you feel that it hasn't been done from what you're saying, but hopefully the period between now and when the application comes back will give you not only a chance to be heard, but a chance to maybe resolve some of the concerns that you do have.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, looking for any other speakers to speak on the adjournment.
Madam Chair, we do have Jacob Bolduc online with his hand up.
All right, I just want to make sure before that there's nobody in the audience, online or otherwise, because I want to be able to close that public portion before we go to Mr. Bolduc. Okay, all right. With that then, Mr. Bolduc, comments?
Yep, good afternoon, Madam Chair. Thank you. I just want to clarify the adjournment. I mean, we were coming in with a request for 2 weeks, but I understand from what you're mentioning, there's an additional variance. I don't think it's a fourth variance that we're seeking necessarily. It was a change of wording to variance A. But in our discussions with staff, it was identified that this wouldn't trigger recirculation. So I can appreciate and understand that that's how the committee sees this, but that was not identified to us before we came in today.
Mr. Bolduc, I'm looking at A and it says nothing about a screen and the height of the screen. In fact, I'm not seeing anything in A, B, or C talking about the height of a screen, and yet that's what we're talking about in the revised wording. So as far as the committee is saying, this is a brand new minor variance, whether it's a third or a fourth or whatever. We'll see that in the notice, so we can we'll know what we're dealing with when we get there.
Okay, no, I appreciate that, Madam Chair. It's just when you mentioned a fourth, I wanted to make sure we weren't adding a variance D and that it was a restructuring of variance A. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything, so I appreciate that clarification.
Okay, well, thank you for that.
Okay.
With that then, if there are no questions from the panel on the adjournment or for any of the speakers, I am going to go to a vote. All those in favor of an adjournment, sine die on this application? All right, so for the record, it's unanimous. This item is adjourned until such time that the notice is recirculated and a new hearing date is established. So thank you everyone for coming in today and for having provided your comments and your input to the committee. We truly appreciate that. So thank you and have a great rest of your afternoon. And we're going to go on to now the fast track agenda items that we have on our agenda. And so with that, then we're going to number 5, which is for 266 and 268 Carruthers. I believe I'm looking for Agent Warren. Good afternoon. Just your name and your address for the record, please.
Yeah, my name is Patricia Warren and my address is 396 Cooper Street, Suite 300.
So the committee's had a chance to look at this application. Seems pretty straightforward. Just want to give a last call to anyone for any comments. There's no additional comments. So from the public standpoint, anyone want to speak either for or against this application? And I'm not seeing anybody come forward. So with that, then I think we can go straight to vote on this one. And I want to start with the consent, because we've got 2 parts to this. It's oh, sorry, just my apologies. My numbering is off for whatever reason. Okay, so with this then, yeah, it's just a consent. So all those in favor? All right, so for the record, the application is unanimously granted. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the second fast track, which is 75 Slater. Agent Wah. Online? Okay.
Hello?
Hello, how are you this afternoon?
Hi. Good, how are you?
Very well. So we've had a chance to look at this application. It's fairly straightforward. Don't believe the committee has any further comments or questions on this application or new information. So I'm just going to do a call out. Anyone in the audience or online would like to speak to this application either for or against? And not seeing anybody, we're going to go straight to a vote. All those in favor? All right, for the record, it's a unanimous granting of the application. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.
All right, so we're going to go to number 8 for 193 Sunnyside. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Christine McQuaig, and I'm the agent on the application for 193 Sunnyside.
So Ms. McQuaid, we will need a full presentation from you today. So we'll just get it teed up and get you a chance to start.
Perfect, thank you. So the application today is for 193 Sunnyside Avenue. It's for a minor variance application to permit a front-facing garage where, based on the results of a streetscape character analysis, no front-facing garage is permitted. Can you advance to the next slide, please? So the subject property is located on the north side of Sunnyside Avenue, just near the intersection with Riverdale Avenue. Next slide, please. The subject site is designated neighborhood with an evolving overlay within the interurban transect. It is zoned residential third density subzone P with exception 487, and it has a lot width of 12.19 meters, a lot area of 371.55, and a lot depth of 30.48. Next slide, please. So this is an image of the existing dwelling on the subject site, which is proposed to be demolished. The existing tree out front is proposed to be retained, and a revised tree information report has been submitted for phased tree protection measures. You'll note there's retaining walls both on the west side of the property as well as the east side of the property, and there are some issues with the retaining walls that will be looked at as they move ahead towards building permit. And then you can see a current detached garage in the rear of the site, as well as a hydro pole just to the right of the driveway and to the left of the stairs. And we've had conversations with Hydro, and the pole is going to be relocated by Hydro. That was already in discussion with Hydro before we made the file. So those are sort of the on-site conditions right now. Next slide, please. So these are some examples within the area where either carports or garages are already existing. I've highlighted all of the ones that are in proximity along Sunnyside, and then there's also a couple on Riverdale. Simply because the subject property is so close to that intersection, it translates to the impact of the character because it connects to Riverdale as well. Next slide, please. So here is an image taken from that intersection of Sunnyside and Riverdale, and you can see that there's a house on the corner with a front-facing garage, and then the house that you see to the right of the image is actually the subject site. So it just gives an appreciation for how close the subject site is to that intersection, and that there is front-facing garages within that sort of proximity of the subject site. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed site plan. Due to both the tree and the retaining wall, we had to maintain the existing access where it is, but to respect interior yard setbacks, it does have to curve a little bit, but there has been a turn radius proposed to demonstrate that slight curve in the driveway is appropriate and functional. And you can also see on the site plan, which is actually clear at this size, that the garage is actually set back 2 meters from the front wall of the building, which is in excess of the 0.6 that is typically required. And this was to ensure that the front portion of the main dwelling was more prominent at the street than the garage. Next slide, please. So this just gives a little bit of a zoom in of how that driveway will function. Next slide, please. This was a render that was prepared showing the sort of architectural composition, demonstrating the front wall of the site and how it will appear on the street. Next slide, please. is a 2D elevation of the front facade and its relationship to the other properties. It's a little bit lower, so it does sit a little bit, visually it looks a little bit shorter in height than the other properties. Next slide, please. So this is a representation of the streetscape character analysis. So the map on the side, all of the areas that are highlighted in yellow, outlined in red, are examples of existing garages or carports, and the subject property is identified in blue. So it is quite close to the intersection. So we've identified the ones that have garages along Riverdale Avenue. Next slide, please. So the variance, of course, is to permit a front-facing garage where the results of the streetscape character analysis identify that front-facing garages are not permitted. Next slide, please. We did review all of the comments from circulation that were submitted. There were original comments or concerns with regards to the tree out front, as well as the private approach and hydro. Through circulation and consultations with all of those technical agencies, we've addressed all of those comments that have been raised with regards to the hydro pole and the tree and the private approach. Heritage as well has been addressed, and it's going to be removed from the heritage register list. When we note that staff have some concerns with the garage variance, but appreciate that it is being set back further than what's required. Next slide, please. So we did a bit of an analysis. So the middle image that you see is what's being proposed and is not permitted, and the two options on either side are permitted as of right. The cantilever option on the far right and the detached garage in the rear on the far left. So the detached garage, it results in a very long driveway and a reduction in the amenity space of the rear yard. So from a planning perspective, it's less desirable. You're reducing that green space and you're increasing impervious surfaces. The proposed option retains, the rear yard for amenity use. It's a smaller driveway, and we are setting the garage back 2 meters instead of 0.6. And it just has less of an impact from an automobile perspective on the lot as a whole. And then with regards to the cantilever option, because of the way it has to work out, you end up with a car constantly visible, and you lose that functionality of having an interior space for sort of garbage and waste recycling. And because of the way you would position it, you end up with that vehicle being parked a little bit closer to the front property line than where the garage is as well, because we're trying to also contain the other setbacks, and we're not proposing any variances to any of the built form setbacks. And the driveway is also a little bit longer as well with the cantilever option. So looking at the permitted options versus proposed, from an overall site impact, we feel that the front-facing garage is the most appropriate option. It maintains the most amount of green space. It's a shorter driveway, it hides the car, and it also allows functional use for other residential uses, storing bikes and garbage and those other types of things that people tend to put in their garages. Next slide, please. The resulting impact too also translates to the second story. So the far left option, you end up losing some second floor space with the permitted options versus the proposed options. So we end up retaining a little bit more livable area. So the middle image, black outline, is what's being proposed. And in either of the sort of permitted options, you end up losing sort of that dotted area that I've shown. So with what we're seeking, we are able to get a little bit more livable space. Next slide. So we've gone through all of the 4 tests. We do believe the variance to be minor. The proposed building is a well-designed to the overall streetscape. It maintains the overall neighborhood character, will remain the same. There's 3 other existing front-facing garages within the SEA context and 5 in the immediate area. Cantilever design is permitted, but there's no cantilever designs in the area. The massing of the home is designed to reduce the visual emphasis by a further offset than what's required. So we believe that the front-facing garage is minor. We also note that the City of Ottawa in the draft zoning details are proposing to remove the SCA as a planning tool. So that's kind of considering that the SCA is likely not going to be in place in the future, is a consideration, of course, as well. Next slide. We feel that the minor variance meets the intent and purpose of the official plan. It provides a contextual detached dwelling with a compatible mass. It's attractively designed that contributes positively to the streetscape, maintains green space, reduces impervious surfaces, and reduces the prominence of the vehicle by hiding it and pushing it back away from the front facade. Next slide, please. It provides housing for large households. It allows the inclusivity and allowing that garage space to be, functionally transitional. Next slide, please. And we also feel that it meets the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. By having that further setback, it reduces the prominence, the window design and materiality, as well as colors, allow the garage to blend in with the overall design. The approval would not alter the ultimate streetscape character group for the area. And the permitted rear yard garage would result in more hard surfaces and less amenity space, which would conflict with policies in the official plan. And there remains space for trees in the rear yard in this direction. Next slide, please. So in our opinion, it is desirable and suitable for the use of the land. It results in a new detached dwelling being constructed on an existing lot that's appropriate and no more auto-centric than existing permissions for cantilevered parking or detached garages in the rear. It doesn't negatively impact the streetscape. It maintains and exceeds the landscaping requirements, doesn't alter the SEA grouping for the street, and provides good design that allows for flexible functional spaces, preserving green space and allowing room for trees and enclosing waste and parking, making these things invisible from the public realm. Next slide. So it's our opinion that the proposed front-facing garage does meet all 4 tests, and it's an appropriate design for the street.
All right, thank you, Ms. McQuaid. Just going back to one of your comments about the character street analysis being eliminated in the new zoning bylaw, can you tell me why then you didn't wait for that to be in place before coming forward?
The draft zoning bylaw details that did come out, it's in the first rounds of consultations, and that process is going to take a significantly long time. And so we can't necessarily rely on when that's going to be formally in place. And as I understand it, it's possible that appeals might come. I believe the new zoning is going to be appealable when it goes through. I believe that may be a lawyer question, but suffice to say, it's going to be quite some time. And the house is currently in quite disrepair. It needs to be taken down. And so they really want to be able to use the space sooner than 2-3 years from now.
And Ms. McQuaid, you do realize though that we have to make a decision on the basis of the bylaw context today?
I do, and I fully appreciate that. And our review of the 4 tests was fully on the basis of its own merits. And we feel that it meets all 4 tests, irrelevant of what the future bylaw is going to be. To me, it was just sort of an interesting piece to note that the city is considering removing that in the future.
All right, thank you, Ms. McQuaid. I'm going to open it up to the panel members for questions at this point. Anyone? Yes, Member Coakley.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Ms. McQuaid, I will give you top marks for the quality of your presentation. I think you've done an admirable job of trying to get around the streetscape analysis issue, but I'm afraid you haven't, as far as I'm concerned. Whether or not the city will or will not remove streetscape character analysis, as you say, is at least several years off. And there is no guarantee that the city will even vote to remove it when it gets to council. You are correct that this particular one will not affect the overall character, except every single variation, every single time we approve somebody to do something that is not covered by the streetscape analysis, you get that much closer to the point at which we're at 50% and the next one gives everybody as right. So as I say, congratulations on the presentation. And I'm very serious about that. I thought you did you've done a very good job, but I'm afraid I'm still hung up on the streetscape character analysis issue. And personally, I don't think it's for me to change, what City Council has decided in the past.
All right, thank you, Member Coakley. Anyone else? Questions? I do have one for Ms. Linker. So we saw an example of the cantilevered option, and in that one we saw that maybe 1/3 of the vehicle seemed to be screened by the, and it just remind me, are there any minimums or maximums in terms of how much a car can be under a cantilever? Like, so is there sort of a maximum to how far out a cantilevered portion of the house can be?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, there is. It is no more than 1.8 meters over the parking space.
So if we're talking about a parking space that would be, what was it, 5.2 in length?
Yes.
So it still means though that you can get 2/3 of the vehicle. And assuming your vehicle is 5.2 meters in length, you could get 2/3 of your vehicle screened through a cantilever. Correct?
Thank you for the question. I think so 2/3 of the vehicle would still, I believe, be exposed. And 1.8 meters would be covering the vehicle.
Oh, so the maximum covering is 1.8, not, okay, all right, I understand. So, okay, thanks for that. So that means 1/3 of the parking space. All right, just wanted to make sure we understood, like, so if we're
Yeah.
looking at, different options that you've given us to consider, we just want to make sure we understand that it was done in keeping with what really is your minimum and maximum. So go ahead, Ms. McCraig, I see you have.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add on too. So I've gone through various neighborhoods and sort of looked at in other places in the city. There's a few in Westboro where cantilevers have been done, and the majority of the vehicle does end up being still very visible and still away from the cantilever, because I find often people will put their recycle bins at that back wall. And so they're not pulling their vehicle space in as far as they could, simply to allow them to have that space for waste and recycling at the back wall.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Other questions from anybody on this one? All right, I'm just trying to be sure we've looked at all of this. You're aware that the right-of-way management department has concerns with regards to the design of the right-of-way approach, the private approach?
We have since addressed the right-of-way concerns. I believe Ms. Linker's updated report had them stricken out.
Okay, I don't have that revised report for one reason or another. Okay, so then maybe you can speak to the other concern that planning forestry has about the impacts on tree 1.
So tree 1 is the tree in the front yard that's sort of enclosed in that retaining wall. And we did submit an updated TIR. Those comments were also stricken from the updated planning report. It just simply resulted in a phased tree protection approach, because they have to deal with the demolition of the existing building and then the construction of the new building, and in consideration for retaining the retaining wall. And part of the reason why we're proposing to keep that retaining wall is simply to aid in the tree protection.
Okay, one last one, because there's a number of flags here that have been raised for us, at least in the original report.
Mhm.
So the cover letter notes that the garage can be converted into a living space. Was that in your submission?
That was in my submission, yes. And so part of our rationale when I'm reviewing the various options and whether they meet the 4 tests, and in reviewing the official plan policies, if we have a detached garage in the rear yard, it's not serviced, it's completely separate. It's a separate structure. There's very little easy way that it can be converted in the future to something else that's fully usable, especially if it was going to be a coach house. It would have to be, rebuilt and services put in and all these types of things. But in the future, if this garage space is deemed to no longer be needed for whatever case or purpose, it's an easier ability for them to convert that into living space. And people have done that in the past. And also it's an option if they don't have a car in the future. I mean, our garage, we have 2 kids, so, our bikes and the kids' bikes, and that's, it's not necessarily used for auto-centric purposes, but maybe family purposes. And so it's a little bit more flexible, easy connected to the living space, and it can be converted in the future to living space, whether that be, maybe a studio if this ends up being a multi-generational type house, and encouraging sort of those, multi-units per lot direction that the province is going in. It's easier to do that with an attached space. It's easier to be heated, electrified, et cetera. Or if you're having an electric vehicle, it's a lot easier to have that electrical connection in a connected space than if you have a detached garage in the rear.
All right, so Ms. McQuaid, you seem to have reviewed the draft bylaw more than I have at this point. In this zone, has the parking requirement, is it proposed to be eliminated?
those details weren't available in the draft bylaw in terms of how many parking spaces per units. It hasn't gone into that detail yet.
So can I just, Ms. Linker, can you just confirm that the draft bylaw does not, like, I thought, because I thought, you know, eliminating parking in some zones was actually a fairly, you know, high priority for the city. So can you just confirm for this zone in particular, would the parking requirement be eliminated?
Thank you for your question. I'm not sure about this zone in particular, as it will be rezoned to some sort of neighborhood use zone, I assume. But I know that the general direction of the new zoning bylaw in line with the new official plan is to reduce parking minimums.
Okay, so Ms. McQuaid, go ahead, please.
If I can clarify, the city is proposing to remove minimum parking requirements, but it's not prohibiting parking from being allowed.
Okay, but
To clarify the distinction.
the only reason I ask is because, you know, so I appreciate the intensification opportunity that the attached garage provides, but it also would eliminate the legal parking space. So if there's no parking requirement, and that's whatever that transformed zone is, then great. But if
I don't believe there is a minimum parking requirement currently.
Ms. Linker, is that correct?
Thank you for the question. That's correct. For this particular area of the city, no parking is required for the first 12 units.
Perfect.
But
In which
parking
case-
is allowed, it's just not required.
Okay, I understand. That's perfect. So the comment about it losing your legal, it doesn't matter. It's kind of
Correct.
a moot point
Correct.
anyway. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Anybody else before I go out to the public? All right. So based on my list, let's see if we've got anybody. Is there a Pamela Wigan?
She's online.
All right. Thank you. Ms.
Yeah.
Wigan?
Oh.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Ms. Wigan, sorry, Ms. Wigan, before you start, can I just get your municipal address for the record, please?
Oh, yes, 206 Sunnyside Avenue.
Perfect. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I appreciate the comments that were made by the colleague who has zoomed in. I have been living in this area since 1977 and have been seeing with alarm the changes that have been going on. I wholeheartedly agree with his point about there being already too many of these variances that have been allowed, and they're adding up to not a minor variance in terms of its impact on the community. And it changed the nature of the street interactions as it is now with the setback garage. People visit regularly back and forth across the street, and it really contributes to the walkability and the welcoming nature of the community. And I know there are a number of my other neighbors who are concerned with this. And the zoning bylaw was developed through considerable consultation. And the whole point was to protect the traditional nature of the community. And if this is going to be routinely exempted, then what was the point of having that bylaw passed in the first place? Is my question. It is one by one getting around the whole point of having that bylaw. And the community as it stands right now, yes, there are several of these other situations on the street, but I, for one, and my husband, who also lives here, and my daughter, it really is having an impact on the way the street presents itself. And we are directly across from this. If there was a carport, instead of this attached garage, it doesn't present the same sort of monolithic impact of the building on the street. And so our view of the street is going to be directly impacted by how this is carried out. So I guess that's basically my point, but I do have a question of what were the heritage considerations and why were they not of concern?
All right, so Ms. McQuaid, maybe I'll get you to answer that question.
Absolutely. So there are different levels of, heritage value, I suppose, for, either properties or areas. And some properties are designated what's called Part 4 under the Heritage Act, and they are sort of fully protected. The city of Ottawa and other municipalities have, gone through in past years and identified certain properties as being on what's called the Heritage Register list. And it basically says there may be some heritage potential, but we don't know. We haven't really reviewed it yet. Recent legislation was passed, I guess it was last year, that basically identified that properties listed on the Heritage Register list were going to have to be either designated or removed. And the city of Ottawa has been in the process of removing a number of properties off of the Heritage Register list, basically saying that they don't believe they have any heritage value. And so as part of that, this particular property was removed from the Heritage Register list. And so it no longer has sort of any heritage association designation associated with it. We did also submit, when it was still on the Heritage Register list, we had to submit the 60 days notice to staff to identify that the proposed dwelling was going to be demolished.
All right, thank you, Ms. McQuaid. Ms. Wiggins, does that satisfy your question or answer your question?
On that issue, yes, but I still feel that the materials used and the nature of the building is a much more impersonal view. And my husband's an architect, and so both of us are quite tuned into these kinds of concerns. And it's not particularly a view that I personally want to be looking at forever after. If it had been based on some sort of brick construction, that would be preferable. But I guess basically I've made my points.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Wiggin. Is there anyone on the panel who has questions for our speaker? All right, no. All right, so thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
It's going to go on to, I don't think I have anybody else on my list. So is there anyone either in the audience or online who would like to speak to this application? All right, I'm not seeing anybody. So I think what we'll do then, Ms. McQuaid, is just give you a couple of minutes to recap, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you. So just to summarize, we've reviewed the variance request against the 4 tests in the Planning Act. We do believe that the variance is minor, not only in comparison of the proposed design to the streetscape and its relationship to Riverdale and Sunnyside, but that it does meet the intent and purpose of both the official plan and the zoning bylaw for a number of reasons. The flexibility of that space, the preference of that particular approach versus the permitted options being a cantilever or a detached garage in the rear. Those particular options have a number of negatives from a planning and urban design perspective. And we feel it is a desirable and appropriate use for this property where a parking space is permitted. We think that this is the most appropriate way of doing it in a way that allows the most flexibility for the space going forward and is less impactful than other options, both from a design perspective. We don't feel the cantilever is an appropriate design for the street, even though it's permitted. And it does present that vehicle being constantly viewed. And the rear yard detached garage option increases the imperviable space on the site, and it reduces tree planting area in the rear yard. So we feel this is the most appropriate, and it does meet all 4 tests under the Planning Act. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. McQuaid. So I think I'm going to make a guess here based on our past behaviors, or I guess how we've dealt with these, and we're going to reserve.
I expected.
You expected that. Okay. All right. So then we're consistent and predictable, though. That's good to know. All right. So thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
All right. Okay. So that takes us, I think I'm just going to go backwards. So let's go to number 7 for 756 Scott Street, looking for Agent Kelly. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is actually Ryan Polton. I'm from Novatech. I'm filling in for Jeff.
All right, so Ryan Fulton. All right, so Mr. Fulton, I don't think that we need a full presentation on this one, so I'm just going to open it right up to questions from the panel members. Anyone? All right, not seeing any questions. I just want to confirm things then with you regarding the information that was originally required by staff regarding the elevations in the rear window. So we no longer have that issue. Is that correct?
It's my understanding that those comments have been resolved. We've updated the left elevation. It'd be the east elevation of the building to remove 2 windows. And that has addressed the city's concern with regard to privacy and overlook. And so we believe that those comments have been addressed.
All right, but we still have one concern outstanding from staff that I can see regarding the contiguous rear wall pattern along Scott Street. So my understanding is that the proposed rear yard setback deviates from what is in fact not the standard, but essentially the what's on the street today, what exists.
So yeah, city staff have noted that there's an existing built form in terms of the rear yard setback where all the buildings to the east are in alignment. But in terms of our perspective on this, the lot lines are kind of skewed, and there are various different lot depths for all of those properties. And they're all adjacent to another property that fronts onto Western Avenue. The 1756 Scott Street is a deeper lot that has additional land that has a greater lot depth. And the required rear yard setback in this zone for all of these properties is tied to how deep the property is. So it's supposed to be 25% of the lot depth. So as of right today, all of those properties could be developed with differing rear yard setback requirements because it's based on lot depth, including the subject property. So as of right today, they could get a building permit for a building that deviates from this observed built form. And therefore our request for minor variances has no impact on the ability to deviate from that existing urban form today that's observed. So there's no requirement under the zoning bylaw for that built form. It's just how the buildings were built about 100 years ago. We feel that granting the minor variances would have no impact with regard to the urban built form of the area based on what's permitted today.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fulton. Member Coakley.
So just to follow up on that, and maybe Mr. Fulton, you don't know the answer, and perhaps Ms. Linker does, and if nobody does, it's not the end of the world. Are those other properties also, to the best of anybody's knowledge, illegal non-conforming, or are they all in compliance with the bylaw? Do we know that?
So my understanding is they were built long before the city adopted their current zoning bylaw, and therefore, relative to the existing zoning of the property, they're all legally non-conforming buildings with regard to lot area, lot width. So yes, it's a similar situation for the subject property as the other properties in the area.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Other questions? All right. Okay, so Mr. Fulton, the only other thing that I'd like to raise with you is in regards to some concerns that we received. Can you speak to those, please?
Yes, so I understand I've reviewed a few letters received by the Committee of Adjustment from the neighbors along Western Avenue. And principally, the comments relate to the existence of a rear lane and a laneway. And it's its own separate parcel. And my understanding is it's disputed who owns the property. I understand the city staff report says that it's a city-owned laneway, whereas on review, it looks like it might be privately owned. But to that point, however, that laneway does not relate to our proposed variances in rear yard addition. So we're not proposing any access over that rear lane to access the rear yard. For the property as it exists today, there's a shared driveway between the property to the west, and that shared driveway provides access to the rear yard of both properties. The construction of the addition will not preclude the use of that shared driveway to access the rear yards, both for pedestrians and vehicles. And so access will continue to be provided off of Scott Street for 1756, and I believe it's 1758 Scott Street, which is the adjacent property to the west. And so no changes are proposed in that laneway. No changes are proposed in terms of the use of that laneway today. And therefore it is irrelevant to our requested minor variances.
All right, thank you, Mr. Paulton. Member Coakley. Oh, so you're, okay, so you can maybe want to lower your
It was,
hand.
yes, I apologize.
It was from the last
Forgot to
time.
lower my hand.
All right, so Ms. Linker, can you, how did you come to the conclusion that the laneway is owned by the city?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure where it's referred to that staff noted that it was city-owned. I did look into it and I believe it's privately owned. I wasn't able to find who has access to that easement, but I do know who owns it. It's not the subject site, but I don't know if they do have access to traverse over it. When I spoke to Mr. Kelly previously, I said that I think that interior side yard access for those living in the secondary dwelling unit would be more appropriate from Scott Street. But if they do have access over the easement, then they're more than welcome to walk over the access from Western Avenue. So again, I didn't think that it was related to the minor variance, as they do still have appropriate access from the interior side yard from Scott Street.
All right, thank you for that clarification. I asked because if it was city-owned, then it opens up other opportunities for things, and we just wanted to see, you know, how this could play out over time. So if it's not held by the city, that's actually good news. So, okay. All right. Any other questions? All right, Member Wright.
Through you, Madam Chair. There are also some additional neighborhood concerns regarding a privacy fence and the survey boundary stake in the bed of in the base of one of the trees. Could you address that?
Okay, so yes, my understanding is that there is an existing fence that runs along the property. I'm just going to get a map out so I can help. So I think there's an existing fence that runs along the property of 12 Western Avenue that's adjacent to the rear lane. It's set back slightly from the rear lane, and there's been some debris stored there temporarily. It's my understanding that that debris was removed, and so that concern has been addressed. We're not sure. Based on my review of that letter, they're concerned that they may end up, if that wooden survey stake is moved, they might have to end up resurveying that their own property. Now, I can't speak to whether or not if a wooden stake is moved, it would result in the requirement to resurvey 12 Western Avenue. However, nothing we're proposing here today would have any impact on that fence or that rear lane. Again, we're proposing a minor variance for reduced lot area and lot, a minor variance for reduced rear yard setback and reduced rear yard area. And so our request there does not relate to those concerns specifically. I wouldn't foresee a situation where 12 Western Avenue would need to be surveyed as a result of approval of our minor variance request.
All right, thank you. Okay, any other further questions from anyone? Okay, with that then on my speakers list, we have no one registered. So is there anyone in the audience or anyone online who would like to speak for or against this application for minor variance? All right, not seeing anybody come forward. Let's go to a vote. All those in favor?
Could we reserve, Madam Chair?
I beg your pardon?
Would it be possible to reserve, Madam Chair?
Yes, of course, we can reserve on this. So with that then, Mr. Poulton, we will make a decision, as you know, and you'll get the decision in due course.
Thank you very much and have a good afternoon.
All right, thank you. Okay, we're reserving on that one. Okay. Okay, so I think I'm going to go back to number 1 for 2410 Carlsen Avenue. Have we got the agent, Mr. Joday? Good afternoon. Can you either bring the microphone closer to you because I thank you.
Good day, Madam Chair.
Hey, good afternoon. So on this, I don't believe we're looking for a presentation on your application. So I'm just going to open it directly up to the members of the panel. All right, seems fairly straightforward. We're doing reduced lot width and lot area. No concerns from our planning staff. Okay, there's no questions. Let's go to a speakers list, see if we've got anybody. We have no one. So is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak either for or against this application? Not seeing anybody. All right, I think panel members, we can go to a vote on this. All those in favor? All right, so for the record, the application is granted. Thank you very much. Okay.
I believe I'm the next applicant as well. The next
Okay, well then you can stay right there. And we're going to go to number 2. Okay, so with that, let me just catch up on that. So that's granted. All right, so on number 2, we're talking about 1119 Heron Road, applications for minor variance again. And let's see here, just let me catch up for a moment. Again, we're talking lot area and lot area and reduced lot width. Don't think we're looking for a presentation from you on this one either. Any questions from our panel members on this application? Yes, member Keklicka, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question to planning or forestry staff. I don't know, either one could answer. I think you will agree, and I think we all agree that the urban forest strategy is very important for the city and the tree canopy issue. And I'm just wondering about the language used in the report that talks about, it's sort of, it's a bit vague. And would a tree permit be required or not? Because the information here says it would be or could be, the planting of more than a dozen trees. So I'm just wondering if the language could be stronger or clearer in terms of being consistent with the direction the city's taking.
Through you, Madam Chair, I was wondering if we could get our forester to speak on this.
Yes, have we got Ms. Young? Oh, who we got today?
Julian Alvarez Barkham.
All right, welcome. Go ahead, please.
Thank you for the question. And through you, Madam Chair. Yes, I could certainly in the future provide more clear language. I left it as a would just because of the depending on the conclusion of the panel. But in this case, there is not sufficient space to plant all of the compensation trees that would be required for the proposed removals. They're proposing 6 trees on site. The arborist has revised the replanting plan, or is revising the replanting plan to provide 1 large growing tree in the backyard. I have requested that they revise the servicing plan to retain the healthy city tree in the front. So there may be changes further down the line to the the replanting plan. But a permit would certainly be required for the removals.
Okay, thank you. I think that should be made clear if you don't mind my suggesting that. So, but thank you for your explanation.
Thank you.
All right, other questions regarding this proposal to replace single-family home, semi-detached? No? All right, then we will go to, we have a number of, no, hang on, no, we don't. We don't have any speakers that are registered. Is there anyone though, but I am noticing that there are a number of concerns though that have been submitted by members of the public. So is there anyone in the audience either here today or online who would like to speak to this application? No one coming forward? All right. Okay. So there are a number of concerns with this. Can you just tell me a little bit about the public consultation that you undertook?
Through you, Madam Chair. So we did reach out to the neighbor. We received 2 letters of concern. One of them just came in this morning, I believe. And that was more in regards to the existing properties in disrepair in terms of condition. It's in very bad shape. There is concern with the sheds in the back and how there's some rodents and how we would take care of that. We do have a demolition permit already applied and actually been issued for this particular property. So we will be talking next steps with that particular neighbor and try to addressing all her concerns. Again, we are owning this property, want to demolish and build it for a long term. We actually have the owner here as well. So we do want to be careful with how we proceed with the demolition and the construction. And we will be taking measures to make sure that all our concerns are addressed.
All right, thank you. So, and I just want to cover off this other concern with regards to the measurements on the property. You did submit an up-to-date survey, did you?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm not sure what measurements you're referring to. There wasn't any requirement to submitting any additional survey. There was some questions in regards to the width of the driveway, if that's what you're referring to, but other than that, I didn't receive any comments back from nor the city, nor the planner, nor nobody else in regards to a revised survey.
All right, so just let me cover this off then with, is it with Ms. Linker on this one? No, Ms. Horn. So Ms. Horn, on this then, we saw this comment, but you've reviewed, so you had an up-to-date survey that you used to review your planning, do your planning review and ensure that everything had been covered off. We just want to make sure that we're dealing with the most accurate information.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had posed the driveway width question to the applicant, and in response, he sent me a new plan. And so, or a plan that showed the driveway widths, and he clarified through email.
Do you have, and I'm sure I saw something in the package, but do you have a revised, so the survey plan that I'm seeing here was, and it's too small for me to pull out a date for you. Let's see if I can. Nope, it's decidedly too small for me, but it does look. 2023, you see that? I'm so impressed. Maybe that. So, okay, so it is a fairly up to date. So that's just what I wanted to cover off. And because that date is relatively recent, then I'm not sure what the comments are from in opposition that we received. Unless Ms. Horn, you have any further information about those concerns, the nature of those concerns?
I do not. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Okay. But at least we know now that we have an up-to-date survey that we are working from. So that's good news. That's it then. I think there's nobody else who wants to speak to this item. So we'll give you 2 minutes to wrap up if you'd like. Then Mr. Jude.
Through you, Madam Chair. So I would like to just clarify a little bit in regards to the comment. There was some question about the width of the driveway. I did respond back to her, and the initial site plan didn't change at all. The survey didn't change at all. Nothing changed. It was just more showing the outline of the driveway. It does conform to what's required. In regards to the application itself, we're only asking for minor variance for lot width and lot area, both. Had I presented, I could have shown you that it fit into the neighborhood. There are quite a few other properties in the same neighborhood, under the same zoning, under the same lot size and lot width that have built semis, and that's what we're proposing here. There are other forms of construction in regards to what's been proposed, what's been built, but in our case, we're just building a traditional semi. And we're only asking for a lot width, lot area, 50 by 100. That entire neighborhood actually is, the vast majority of it are 50 by 100 lots, and this is just one of them. So we're just proposing for that. There is no other variances being requested in terms of setbacks, in terms of height, in terms of any other parking. Everything else is completely compliant to the zoning requirements.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jude. I think we can go to a vote on this one unless I'm not seeing any opposition to that. So all those in favor? Okay, for the record, the application is unanimously granted. Thank you so much for your time today on both these applications.
Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, that takes us to, is this one of these last but not least, I think situations? We've got number 4, which is for 149 King George Street, looking for Mr. Hume. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of committee.
So, Mr. Hume, we are going to be looking for a full presentation from you, if you could, please.
So thank you, Madam Chair. This is a minor variance and consent application for a property at 149 King George in Overbrook. It's the property resides in an R3 zone, and it is currently part of a school property. Now it has a little bit of history, so I'm going to walk you through how we got from what you see on your screen, which is the original site plan that was advanced to city staff. And you'll notice that on either side yards, and the side yard variance is one of the things that we'll talk about a little further. This proposal is compliant in side yard variances.
So, Mr. Hume, can I just, sorry to interrupt you, just if you could, as part of your presentation as well, and I'm not sure if it's in your presentation, but if you could also address why you're proceeding on the basis of multiple consents as opposed to a plan of subdivision.
Oh, yeah, I can do that, and I'll do that at the when we get to the next step. So, this site plan was the first site plan that was advanced to the city, and at that time, because part of the property is related to a heritage property, we had to go to a heritage committee, and we had to provide a heritage impact statement. So in discussions with the city heritage folks and city planning, the proposal evolved to the next slide, the proposal that you see before you. And the reason that it's off center is because of the prominence of the front of the school within the context of the heritage building. The heritage building has 3 parts to it. The first, front and middle are related, or the heritage aspects, the heritage attributes. The rear of the building is not. So we had to provide, or we were, in order to acknowledge the heritage feature, we had to provide a larger prominence to the front of the building that's off of King George Street. And as a result of that, The recommendation was to slide the development northward to allow for that prominence. So that application went to Built Heritage Committee based on the plan that you see, and the Built Heritage Committee and City Council approved that development in January of this year. So after we received that approval, we started to work on the consent application. And to your point, Madam Chair, right now, a single consent would allow this proposal to be developed as opposed to a multiple subdivision, because it doesn't require site plan approval. The reason for multiple consents is because the individual units will ultimately be sold. And as a result, when we looked at the applicability of, I think Section 54 of the Planning Act, a consent in this context was more appropriate than a plan of subdivision. So that was the reason why we took this approach. Plan subdivision also much more expensive and time consuming. And we didn't believe that it would canvass any more issues and any more requirements than a consent application would in that regard, given that we could have built the entire proposal on the basis of a single consent, should we not have wanted to sever it and sell them to individual owners. So that was the reason we chose the more expeditious and cost-effective route of the consent application. And when reviewed by city staff, planning had no concerns with the consent approach.
So just so I understand this then, when you say you could have gone with just one severance as opposed to multiple severances, you're talking about having retained that parcel then for the purposes of developing what a condominium style?
So if this was a rental project and we weren't interested in selling the individual units, we would have severed the larger parcel from the main, from the retained parcel from the school, and then sought a building permit. The multiple consents are a result of the desire on behalf of the owners to sell the individual units.
And can you not do that through, I've seen
Yes,
townhouses through condo.
yes, we could do that through a plan of condominium, but because these all front on, they don't front on a private way, for example, where you would often see a condominium agreement used in combination with a site plan, where you would have, or on a private way, where you would have poddles, so you'd have a common elements condo. And we didn't need to do that because we're going to front on we're going to front on a street. We're going to have services connecting directly to each of the units.
So, Mr. Hume, you haven't sold me yet. And I'll tell you why, because the kinds of things that I'm concerned about, without going through either a condominium process or through a subdivision process in this, is how would you ensure that when one of these homeowners decides to re-roof,
right,
that in fact that it's re-roofed it like at the same time, and that it's, that there's and sort of equal quality materials. And so I'm thinking about, that I'm thinking about the easements that you've asked for and ensuring that they are properly maintained. So for example, if somebody would need to have access, and I see your hand is up, Ms. Libman, so let me just get through my comments and I'll go to you, because I think you're the one who's going to be answering this question.
And I think she's going to go where I'm going to go, but go ahead.
So that's what I'm looking for. So, when you look at the easements even that you're asking for, how does one ensure that each one of the homeowners on the end pieces are going to clear those those easements and those accesses for the remainder of, so those are the kinds of things that a
Right.
plan of subdivision or a condominium, even better, to be honest with you, I think, would actually address those things. So I'm a little uncomfortable about
Right.
given that we have, and Ms. Libman, this is what I'm going to be looking for from you, is given that we have better tools in some ways to ensure under the Planning Act that those things can be addressed. Just need to hear a little more justification as to why this severance process, just give us comfort that this severance process will provide those future owners with the protection that they need and that they would otherwise get under a condominium.
So, Krista, are you going to say, go ahead, Krista.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So good afternoon, committee. So I think I disagree. There's no limit in the Planning Act on the number of lots that can be approved through a severance. And when we do build townhouses in a subdivision, within a block on a subdivision, there is no joint use and maintenance agreement on those townhouses to govern things that the chair mentioned, such as roof replacement. Here, there is a condition for a JUMA, which we will be providing to legal services to review, and that will cover things like roof repairs. But at the end of the day, it just comes down to good neighbors working together, and there's really nothing that you can do through the plan of subdivision process to force joined neighbors to work together. What I will say is, as Peter mentioned, the proposed units do front on a public street, and they are serviced from those public streets. There's no internal servicing to be built. There's no school site to be dedicated. There's no parkland to be dedicated. There's nothing beyond if this were just 2 or 3 units, it just happens to be 8. And so for that reason, I don't think a plan of subdivision is necessary. I think the criteria under section 5124 is met, and it is appropriate to proceed with a consent. I'll also mention part lot control, which is sometimes an opportunity to create lots. But unfortunately, there is an underlying plan of subdivision here. But in the old days, when those old plans were laid, there were often lands left over that didn't get included. And there happens to be a portion of this property that's not on an underlying plan of subdivision. So it is not able to go by part lot control.
All right, so thank you, Ms. Lidman. Can you also then just provide opinion on the possibility of going through site plan and condominium development?
So it's not subject to site plan under the city's bylaw. And again, going through condominium, once again, that's usually required when there's something like a public street or a shared garbage or a shared green space or something more substantive to be shared than just a roof and party walls. It requires a full agreement. It is helpful, definitely, for people to have the protection of the Condominium Act. But in a case like this, with a public street fronting townhouses, I think it would be overkill or more than what's necessary to ensure orderly development and the continued functioning of the building post-approval.
All right, thank you. So just before because I think I don't think, Mr. Hume, you had a chance to finish your presentation. We got on this tangent. So let's close this tangent. So I just want to give an opportunity for any of the members of the panel to speak to this appropriate planning tool. So whether, we do it by severance so any comments or questions that anyone would have about the line of discussion we just had? Yes, Member McLean.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Has the parcel that's being developed been created at this time? The application's made in the name of Ruling Yet Corporation.
Right.
Do they own the land at this?
Yes.
So there was a severance creating the parcel of land from the school?
No, not yet. That's all part of this application.
So you don't feel that you needed a conveyance to create the parcel for the 8 units?
No, and I'll look to Ms. Lidman to give me a hand here because we looked at how the severance would occur.
one of the applications that's filed, each of the applications that's filed severs the individual unit from the retained land, being the school and the 7 other units.
So will you need to obtain a building permit, you will need to create each individual parcel before you get a building permit? Is that, you're going to have to convey from the school to the owner?
Yes, well, the current owner, Rolling Nut Corporation, owns the school. And so it will be self-to-self transfers to create the lots. And
yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
okay, and I just want to go back to the discussion of the common elements condominium for a moment, because in order to do a common elements condominium, you have to create PODLs, parcels of tied land, through the part lot control application process. And as I mentioned earlier, part lot control is not available to these lands because they are not wholly on a plan of subdivision. So in order to do a common elements condominium, we would first have to do a 1-block plan of subdivision to create the block that would then be subdivided through part lot control to create the common elements, of which I'll say again, there are none, and the townhouse unit. So it would be quite a bit more process.
All right, thank you for that. Any further questions on the discussion regarding subdivision versus consents versus part lot control or other? Okay, with that then, Mr. Hume, thanks for indulging us, and go ahead with the rest of your presentation.
Yeah, sorry, Madam Chair, you caught me unaware there for this side of the discussion. So if we can come back to the slide you see before you, this is the site plan that with a minor change that was approved by City Council, and with respect, and a heritage permit granted, subject to the minor variances required through this process. Now, the minor variances that are required here are a number of variances to the interior lots. The interior lots are lot area variances, but when you get to the most northern lot, that requires not only a lot area variance, a very small one, but a corner side yard variance, because as we moved the development northward to accommodate the heritage aspect, it triggered that variance, that new variance. And when planning looked at this, and you've seen your planning report, they have no problems with the lot area. We do meet the rear yard setback requirements, the front yard and the lot width requirements. It's just in those intervening lots, we require a lot area variance. So if we can go to what I think is the most important variance that you're going to want to talk about, which is the side yard variances. And as you can see, I've blown up the site plan there. The variances are the zoning bylaw. When you look at side yards, so corner side yards, it advances sort of the optimal solution. You know, if all of the properties were at this corner side yard, it would be the optimal solution. Unfortunately, or the optimal situation. Unfortunately, in reality, the situation on the ground is often much different. So we're coming to the committee and seeking relief to adjust that provision, because the actual relief that we're seeking doesn't actually impact on any of either the abutting properties or the streetscape in general, because the streetscape doesn't in fact represent the optimal situation that's proposed by the zoning bylaw. And I'm going to take you through a couple of pictures and so that I can illustrate that. And I should illustrate, so when you're looking at the pictures, I want you to keep in mind that from the curb line to the property line represents a 5-meter setback from the street line. So when you look at the first picture there, it's looking westbound. You can see the houses to the west, the parking lot in the rear of the school, and the garbage shed that extends into that setback. The second picture looks eastward. That fence is along the property line right now, and you would see that fence replaced with a standard residential fencing that would be along that property line. That picture, that fence advances to the third picture where you see a more, I want to say, decorative fence. It has a concrete base and wrought iron that will that defines the property line. And as you can see, the right-of-way there that exists, that's where we're going to be required to build the new sidewalk. So one of the conditions in the city's approval is to provide that new sidewalk. So if we can go to the next slide. So this is what you'll actually see when you look to the east and west. The first picture is a picture showing 1.5 meters in from the property line. So it gives you the view down the street. So this is as if you're standing at the corner of the building. And what's interesting is that the setback to the property immediately abutting us and across the street is quite a bit set back from the theoretical set zoning line. And the second picture, as you can see, is looking from that property across the street, and you see the fence, and as the fence turns and the fence line, if you can picture, the buildings would be 1.5 meters to the south of that property line, leaving between the property and the street curb edge some 6.55 meters. So quite a bit set back from the street edge. And so when you take that picture of the existing abutting property and you move down to the school, it's a varied streetscape. So the question would be, what impact would moving those buildings and reducing that setback have on the abutting properties and on the streetscape? And it's our opinion that it has no impact. That would be the submission that we would have on that side yard setback variance. And I think that we've looked at the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and we believe that the requested variance is minor. The slight adjustment that we are making has no impacts on adjacent properties, and yards vary, so it is in keeping with the varied streetscape that exists. It is desirable for the development of the property because it allows for new dwelling units to be constructed. And the intent and the purpose of the zoning bylaw is maintained. the bylaw, as I said, seeks to create a positive and engaging streetscape. And the variance does allow that streetscape to be created and maintained. And the general purpose and maintenance of the official plan is maintained. The neighborhood's designated, the site is designated as neighborhood, and the construction of townhouses are in keeping with the intent of the official plan in this area, and certainly the community streetscaping in or the community context. So we believe that the variance is appropriate and should be approved.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hume. Very good presentation, very comprehensive. So thanks for that. We appreciate the information. So there's lots, I'm sure, that we'll want to cover here. So starting with Member Coakley.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And thank you very much for the presentation. I suspect you probably can't say much more to me and answer the question I'm going to pose, but I'll pose it anyway. And I'll tell you what I personally, I don't have any issues with the townhouses. I don't have any issues with the severances. The variance on the size of the individual lots doesn't fuss me too much, but I am a little concerned about the variance on the side lot that you just spent a few minutes talking about, and I appreciate what you had to say. I understand that minor variance is not a mathematical process, but given that you're asking us to agree to something that is only 35%, roughly, if my math is good, what the bylaw would normally require, I must confess that I have some difficulty with that in wrapping my mind around the concept that that be minor. I appreciate what you say about the existing streetscape, but of course, a fair amount of that is currently fencing. It's not building. And so I think, in my mind at least, there is a bit of a difference between the side wall of a building and how that appears and that decorative fencing that you put. So as I say, you may not be able to say much more than what you've already said, and I do appreciate what you said, but I do feel that it's sort of only fair to you to signal to you that I am concerned about that aspect.
Right. So if I can address that, if you think about it in the context of, you're right, follow that fence and imagine that you now have a standard residential fence that separates private property from public property. The question is, where is it appropriate to have the building face as it relates to the fence and to the public property on a where you're going to have your front doors on the other building face. And so the question is there some overwhelming design requirement to have that space? What does that provide for you from a streetscape perspective? And what we're saying is that once you're so you have a wide right of way, almost 5 meters, then you would have if you were to acquiesce to the existing, you'd be set back from the street almost 9.5 meters. And so what we're saying is, when you look at that in context of the creation of an urban environment, that really seems to be almost excessive. And bringing that building forward or forward to that property line really has no profound impact either on the public realm as it exists today or as it will exist in the future. It will be the same public realm and it will not be degraded by the movement of that building. So that adjustment to the zoning bylaw to allow the creation of that unit is not impactful from a planning perspective on the streetscape or on the abutting properties, but it is impactful on the development. I mean, if you were to say, I'm not going, that is too much. And we would be, the only solution to that is not to acquiesce to a larger setback. It would be to reduce the unit. So you would go from 8 to 7. And that certainly impacts the affordability. This development will be required to build a sewer on down the length of of Quill Street. Will be required to build a sidewalk in that right of way to connect that missing link. And the question of how affordable do you make those 7 units versus that 8 units is certainly relevant. When the official plan does talk in a number of locations about affordability in that prospect, especially when the impact of the change is there really is no impact from a streetscape perspective. So it affects affordability, and therefore the streetscape is really, in our opinion, unaffected. I think that's a solid enough reason to allow some flexibility in moving that building northward.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. You anticipated my follow-up question, so thank you for that.
Any other questions from members? Yes, go ahead, Member Ray.
Going back to the very beginning of your presentation when you're talking about the heritage aspect, you are setting back the southernmost unit, number 26.
Yes.
7.5 meters from the front of the school.
Yes.
You're not required to do that. You're doing that because you think it's the right thing to do. And
No, we're required to do that.
You are required.
Yes.
Okay, that's okay.
We're-
My question was, if you weren't required, would you, and we turned you down for the 1.5, you might simply just shift it back to your very first image, but you're required to.
We are by the heritage approval.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, I'm just going to jump in here then. So, Mr. Hume, it's very faded on my version, but can you tell me where, if, first of all, there's parking for the school? And if so, where is it?
The parking for the school is along the rear yard, along Glynn, and along the southern or the western side yard.
And how many parking spaces do we have there?
Looking at there's 5 in the back. There's 5 along the back road. And I think that there are a number of parallel spaces along the southern, sorry, not the southern, the western limit.
Okay, so where I'm going with this is I'm a little concerned about the reduction in the side yard and the ability for traffic or for people moving into the parking spaces along Glynn and, backing up into Glynn. I'm wondering whether or not there's any, would be any kind of safety issue, visibility issue with regards to that reduced side yard.
I can say I don't think that the reduced side yard is going to affect the ability to move in and out of those parking spaces. If you're concerned about the parking spaces, if we can go back to one of the pictures, it would be what sits in the parking space right now is the garbage. So where all that snow is where the parking spaces are. And so you drive into the parking space, and as you can see, you're going to be, if you're worried about traffic, you've got the garbage container, but you still have 5 meters of city right-of-way before you get to the curb.
Just based on that picture, then you're saying from the curb that we see right now,
Yes,
there's 5 meters towards the building, which is,
city right of way. And the parking spaces are then after that,
all right.
is my
Okay.
understanding.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any other questions? Because I think the next place to go then is on the conditions. There are quite a few of them. You've had a chance to look at them.
Yes, we have.
All right. I just have, like, going back to my concerns about ensuring that things are taken care of for the benefit of future owners.
Right.
So, and maybe it's not a question for you so much, probably one for, is it Ms. Linker on this one? Okay. So condition number 5, very wisely, has an infrastructure agreement requirement for the extension of municipal services, and it includes securities. So of course, one of the things that, you know, well, you won't be able to sell the lots without the municipal services. So it all makes sense that we would ensure that, and we have securities to ensure they're done properly.
Right.
Number 6 speaks to that sidewalk. So here we have a situation where the only thing you need to do to clear that condition is to get into a development agreement for the sidewalk. There is no security requirement. And I'm trying to figure out what would be then, like, what would compel the developer to actually put that sidewalk in within a reasonable time frame, and it's not money on the line. It's not. So Ms. Linker, can you tell me how we can get assurances that that sidewalk will go in, you know, in a reasonable amount of time from the end of construction?
Thank you for the question. The development agreement will ensure that this is on title, that the owners agree to do that, as well as any subsequent owners of the properties. I might defer to Ms. O'Connell if she's still on the line regarding the timing of that, but I believe that it's subsequent with their building permit process.
Hello, Ms. O'Connell. So before you answer the question, I guess I'm even more concerned now, having heard Ms. Linker's answer, because, you know, the last thing we want to see is that the requirement for a sidewalk wind up being transferred in title to, like, to the people who take the title on of these new lots. So, because the way it looks to me is the only thing that needs to happen for the clearing of the condition is the actual development agreement being put into place. There's no assurance here, though, that anybody further goes on to actually put that sidewalk in. So can you walk through the process with me to give me some comfort, please?
Sure. I can't guarantee that I will give you that comfort, but I can say the reason why we requested this. Generally speaking, staff haven't identified this sidewalk as one where we're taking development charges for right now for its institution. So any sort of development that happens on the site, though, we'd be looking for off-site works that are desirable in that right of way. So it's the sidewalk. So that's generally the starting point. How we do it, the mechanism is the development agreement. The reason why Ms. Linker mentioned the requirement on title is that the development agreement, even though it's a condition for the consent, it does remain on title for these properties forever and always. And that's part of the reason we've done it in the past related to things like noise conditions and things like that, to provide reference for any sort of lawyer. If somebody was buying one of these townhouses in the future, this will come up when they do a search on title to reference what requirements were put in place for the initial developer. In terms of securities, we're wrestling with this question right now in the department as to what level, what situations we do count securities for and which we don't. In this case, it might be, I mean, taking securities for the provision of the sidewalks would potentially be that hammer that we need to, like, ensure that it's provided. To be fair, it's not a situation we come across very often. So, you know, one way we've secured it is through the development agreement. Another way would be potentially to retain securities on file. So I don't know if that gives you the confidence you're looking for. Which mechanism can we make sure we don't have 100% certainty that this sidewalk will happen into the future? I suppose the risk is that if it doesn't happen in the future, we can work with legal services to see if there's an enforcement mechanism stronger than what we already have for these development agreements, or similar to other things. There's a flurry of conditions that we have in our site plan agreements, for example, that we don't take securities on as well, and that we struggle with as a municipality. So there's a bit of a balance as to what to put on the property owner in terms of those requirements for securities to make things like housing provision affordable, and where we simply have to obligate as best we can through the agreements.
So, but just to be clear, if they were going through either a site planning process or a subdivision process, the securities would be taken on the value of all the works required on site and off site to facilitate this development. So it would automatically be included, those securities would automatically be included in the application and the approval that they would get. Is that not correct?
Yes.
All right, so we are missing a piece here, from what I can tell, which doesn't give me much comfort.
Oh.
So, you know, what I would have preferred, I'll be honest with you, Mr. Hume, what I would have preferred would have been to have seen the expansion of that infrastructure agreement to include the sidewalk and the securities required to ensure that that's done.
Right. I mean, I think on our part, we're agreeable to construct the sidewalk. The mechanism by which it is to be done is up to you. I mean, if it were and I'll ask Ms. Lidman if she can come back and give me some help here, but I'd almost prefer to provide securities versus a development agreement, because I know when I can provide the securities. I don't know when I'll get a development agreement, to be quite honest with you. So maybe Ms. Lidman can help me help you, because we want to provide the sidewalk. No question.
All right, thank you. So what I'm trying to avoid is that you don't clear the condition and then we transfer the lots to individual owners who wind up with
I
the
understand.
requirement for us to put in a sidewalk.
Right. I understand. I
So,
understand your conundrum.
All right, okay, Ms. Lidman, please help us.
So yeah, further to what Peter has said, we would happily provide securities as part of that development agreement. I think a development agreement would be required, could be part of the infrastructure agreement in order to apply securities. It would be a required step. It can't be securities without an agreement, but it has to be through an agreement that is satisfied after the creation of the lots, because of you're not going to build a sidewalk before you build the house, because the sidewalk will probably get destroyed while you build the house. So that's why it has to come later in the process. But certainly we are willing to put up securities for that sidewalk through the development agreement.
All right, thank you, Ms. Lidman. I see Ms. O'Connell, your hand is up. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I was just going to suggest that perhaps the condition at the committee's discretion, if the owner and the applicant are in agreement with this, the condition could be reworded to say that the owner enter into a development agreement with the City of Ottawa with associated securities to design and construct, and so that way we can review what securities would be required for that sidewalk, and we can implement it through the development agreement.
And Ms. O'Connell, why wouldn't we just add it as a component to the infrastructure agreement for servicing?
That's a question I'd rather take back to my legal advisors on that. I know they do separate agreements for different reasons. So we do development agreements to cover a number of things. And I think in this case, we're struggling with trying to apply some conditions that more typically apply to, like you mentioned, like plan of subdivision or site plan conditions, and word them for the committee's purposes. So that might be a possibility. I'm happy if you want to word it, we can go back and investigate that as well, and to say like an infrastructure agreement or development agreement as is appropriate, and we can look into see which is the best mechanism and confirm that with our legal staff.
Okay, so what I'm going to propose then is that we simply modify the wording on number 6 to include or to add wording with regards to the provision of securities in the same language that I guess is in number 5. How you work that out when you go to actually clear these conditions, there is some wiggle room. So whether you decide to all put it under the infrastructure agreement or actually let them stand as separate agreements, I think that is, as you say, Ms. O'Connell, is a discussion between the applicants and yourself and legal. And I'm sure, I think we're all after the same thing here is the best approach and the one that's the most efficient. So I'm going to suggest that we just ensure that we include in number 6, the ability to get at securities, and then let it play out in further discussions with yourselves. Does that work for everyone? Okay, let me put it another way. Does it not work for anyone?
Krista, we're good with that, right?
Yeah, if you're asking me, I'm good with that. Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Yes, so we're good. We're good on our side. We're good with that.
All right, and I was also looking for panel members. Everyone good with that modification? All right, okay, so we're going to proceed that way. All right, is that, have we kind of finished our discussion then on this application? We can go to the public at this point, unless anybody has any other issues or comments or concerns. All right, I'm not seeing anybody raise their hands, so okay. Off to my list, and let's see. I do have a couple of people who are on my list to speak to this application. So do we have Pam Hilchey? Come on down, please. Hello, I'm just going to need you to, just for the record, to give us your name again and your municipal address.
Press the button.
My name is Pam Hilchey, and that's Hilchie, and I live at 182 Glen Avenue. So as a resident of the neighborhood who walks around the school quite frequently, all we have to rely on is the sign that suddenly appeared and said that there was an application for adjustment to accommodate a 8 townhouse development over 9 lots. And I believe the word subdivision is in that notice. I don't have a copy of it with me, but my immediate vision was that the school is coming down and there's going to be a fairly significant development on that parcel of land. A little bit of research on my part, and obviously not exhaustive because what has come up here today is much more complex than I had imagined, reveals that the school, in fact, is not intended to be coming down, but perhaps is intended to at some point be converted into residential units to accommodate something like 21 different suites. As a neighborhood person walking by, the sign that talks about an 8 development townhouse complex is nothing on the scale of what could happen if the school then becomes an apartment block and we have 8 or 9 townhouses out front. And we go from this wonderful vibe of little children playing and enjoying their lives to a whole bunch of cars and parking problems in an already congested area, which is developing like topsy. And I guess my concern is that if people really understood, if in fact the school is intended for residential at some point, if people understood the magnitude of what we're actually looking at here, I suspect there would be a whole lot more presentations coming forward to you. Now, I don't know if that's at all within your purview. I don't know if you understand the magnitude of what this is about, if in fact my information is correct or not. But I think what we're looking at here is a fairly complicated situation, in my view, in terms of impact on neighborhood. One of the things I wondered about is when you started to talk about different forms of subdivision, and this not now being subdivided parcel into 8 or 9 lots, what you meant by consent. I really didn't understand what a consent subdivision might be.
So under the Planning Act, there's a number of ways to allow residential development, multiple units to proceed. So a plan of subdivision literally will take, normally it's a larger parcel of land, but not necessarily. And then there's, you go through the process of understanding what kind of transportation or servicing or that kind of you'd need for the whole of the development. A consent process is literally one that says, yes, you can subdivide the land, but typically it's reserved for situations where it's fairly straightforward. It's typically, this is not a typical application, but typically it's 1 or 2, 3. We've seen up to 5 or 6 lots, increasingly over the years. And what we need to ascertain as to which process is the best one to ensure orderly development, and that's what we're after. Then we have the discussions like we did today about how do you care about things that are, elements in common going forward, and how is that protected. So a consent application could be something as simple as you own a large property, you're over you may decide that you want to subdivide it. You might need minor variances for lot area and lot width, but that's very typical. And people are coming forward with that, but it can be that simple. And then it can be an application like this that has multiple requests to create multiple lots is what I'm really after. And we do call it subdividing still, which is confusing, as opposed to plan a subdivision, which is it's a more comprehensive planning process.
So because the applicant also owns the greater parcel, this is something they can do because of that, or?
No, it
that's
has nothing to
not
do with that.
contingent on that.
It
Okay.
has to do with orderly development, ensuring that the right process and the right tools are used.
So how does each individual, under what right of ownership does each individual townhouse owner own the property? It's just like a subdivision, any subdivision?
Yeah, at that point, it would be, they're calling it freehold, which means that the land and the house can be conveyed to a new homeowner.
So this is just simply a less complex process.
That's correct.
Okay, okay. And is it my understanding, I mean, is what I'm hearing correct, that the school does intend to be used or converted to residential? And is that permitted under all the existing zoning and fish community plan bylaws? And does that mean we will or will not hear more about it when that happens?
So the committee can only deal with what is before it today,
Yes.
which is this application for the multiple lots. What happens to the school going forward is not part of our discussion today. So whether they do intend to convert or not, and that is it's sort of, it's interesting, but it can't influence our decision today. We have to look at the applications on their merit for today.
So that things like will the playground where the children are, is that going to now be buildings, townhouses? That's something an applicant could answer?
So I think we're talking about converting part of the yard, and I'm looking to Mr. Hume, of the school into these residential lots. So if there is a play area today, then yes, it will be lost through this process.
So that, I mean, can anyone on staff confirm that the zoning would permit this conversion to apartments?
It's not, so I can ask staff, but to be honest with you, it's a moot point because we don't have an application before us. So nobody's really, going to undertake the zoning. So it's a difficult question actually to ask staff altogether because
they're not prepared for it.
They're not prepared. They don't have an application. They don't have the particulars. They don't have anything of that. And whether it's, you've heard, if you've been here since the beginning, and I'm sure you probably have, that we're going through a new zoning bylaw review. So, it may even be that there's a different zoning bylaw context that we would be dealing with in any conversion proposal in any event. So I'd prefer we not go down that road today. if you'd like more information though about a potential conversions later on, I invite you to speak with Mr. Hume outside of this hearing process,
Yes.
or to speak with planning staff and get more information about that.
Yeah, I would like to do that. Yes. And thank you for your excellent questions and being so well prepared. And it looks to me like you're making some pretty good decisions. I guess I did have one more question. Is this minor variance strictly in response to what the Heritage Board has requested of the applicant?
No, I don't believe so. It would have been the proposal first, and then they would have approached Heritage staff about it through the process. Was there any deviations, Mr. Hume?
Sorry, we didn't advance. The minor variance came as a result of the heritage. So what was advanced first was the first slide that I showed you, which was zoning compliant on either side yards. But as a result of the heritage approval and the requirements of that approval, we had to shift the building to the north, which then necessitated the variance. So if you can go back to the first slide, that was the first proposal that you see, which had zoning compliant variances, zoning compliant side yards on each end.
And it's the predominance of the King George heritage facade that then led to their request to move the units. So
Right. What they said was, you need to give that front door more prominence. And you can't have that side yard and that building can't be there. You need to do something. And we said, okay, we will slide the buildings northward. And the city heritage staff said, fine, we're accepting of that. And we knew at that time that created that requirement for that variance. And it was on that basis that we went to Build Heritage and City Council with that design.
all right, thank you. Anything else?
Madam Chair, I would just suggest that if that building is going to become an apartment block, like heritage value is sort of moot, isn't it?
Well, but
Makes
it's
more
not
sense
before
to
us.
me that
Yeah.
it would be a centered development, not off-center.
Yeah, but so it's not before us today, though. So whether, we don't have anything to suggest that it is being converted. So because, and the evaluation, the heritage evaluation would have been in the context of what is being proposed, not of what might happen. So, so that's why you're saying what you're saying.
I guess I'd just like you to consider the off-centeredness and whether that makes a whole lot of sense.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any
thank you.
questions for our speaker? Member Coakley is the question for our speaker?
No, it's not for the speaker, but it is a follow-up to the issue she just raised around, excuse me, whether the variances were the result of the heritage decision. And if I understood correctly, and I just want to confirm, if your original plan had been acceptable to the Heritage Committee, you would not be seeking a side lot variance, but you would still have been seeking lot size variances. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I still have somebody else on my list for today, looking for Mr. Pearson. He's not here. Is he online? I just need a confirmation.
No, we do have somebody named Mike online, but I've tried promoting him and he's declined.
Ah, okay. With that, then I'm just gonna make Member Coakley, is your hand up? Nope, okay. All right, so I'm just gonna make a call out to anyone in the audience here or at home who would like to speak to this application, either for or against.
Madam Chair, this is Julian from Forestry.
Yes.
Sorry to interject. I don't have anything for or against, but I would like to flag that the TIR provided doesn't reflect the current variance, but the previous proposal that was pushed back against by Heritage with the centered location of those buildings. So an updated TIR will be required.
All right, that's not a condition though, is it, at this point?
No, it's not.
Need to
Just
add
wanted to
that
flag
as
that with the,
condition number, where would we go with that one? Okay, so to capture that one, we would be condition number 10.
yes, I believe that's correct.
All right, so Mr. Alvarez, Barkham, what
Mhm.
kind of wording would you like?
Sorry, let me just pull that up. That an updated TIR be provided reflecting the proposed location of the building.
All right, that sounds fine. So, Mr. Hume, you okay with that added condition?
I'm pretty sure we have an updated TR. I don't know why you wouldn't have it, but I'll go back to the team and we can provide that. That's not a problem.
All right, that's perfect.
Thank you.
Do we need to make do we really need a condition then for that? If I have an undertaking from you to provide?
Madam Chair, you can make it a condition. You don't need to. I will provide you with an updated TIR.
All right, let's leave it at that then and just ensure. My apologies that it gets done. Okay. Where was I going next with this? I just had just a couple more questions on Mr. Hume. So, yeah, if you reduce the number of lots, did you look at that? So, okay, so here's my question. To meet the corner side yard requirement and the heritage permit requirement of the setback, how many lots would you get in?
I think we modeled that and we would lose the end unit. So we would lose one lot.
And that's still with the requirement though for the reduced areas? And
Well, so the units may get a bit bigger, but we don't gain enough. We can't. So we can't squeeze the 8 into the side yard with the side yards. So we would have to lose one, and maybe the 7 get a little bigger, but marginally so.
And so if you know, say you decided to go ahead without actually having, you just provide a consent application for consent without any need for any, lot area and lot widths, how many lots would you get in that case if they already met the zoning requirements?
So what you're saying is if we didn't need any variances at all,
Yeah, how many lots?
we didn't calculate that, but I want to say, and I wish my designer was on the line. We might get 4, maybe 5. We might get 5.
All right, thank you. I
So,
just wanted
but
to get some sense.
There's as we start to reduce the lots and the lot fabric, we're going to start to run into some significant economic issues, because one of the big drivers, and it's not the sidewalk, it's the construction of the sewer, of a new municipal sewer from Glynn to King George to service these units, which is item number 5, is an exceptionally large cost, which is going to be quite substantial. That is the big cost of the development. And as we start to reduce the number of units and we have services, it becomes very expensive on an individual lot basis. So what happens is whatever's left over gets much more expensive.
All right, thank you. I'm going to ask Ms. O'Connell to come back for a moment if she's still around. Hi, Ms. O'Connell. Just another quick question to you. Then in these, this infrastructure agreement, in the development agreement for the sidewalk, are plans attached to that? So in other words, you'd have the agreement and that it would have to be done in keeping with the plan that shows, like, I didn't realize that we were talking about the extension of municipal sewer, for example, as part of these you know, the extension of municipal services, I was thinking water and wastewater is all I was thinking, to the individual lots. So do you typically request that they actually draw up plans and that they be attached to these agreements?
If they're not attached to the agreement, there would be a reference to that, to that design as part of the agreement moving forward. So
All right.
yes.
So it is captured, so it's not like a debatable point later on.
No.
That's what I want to make sure. Okay, thank you so much. That's my question on that. All right. Anybody have any other comments or questions before we turn it over to Mr. Hume for a wrap up? All right, over to you, Mr. Hume.
Madam Chair, I'll thank the committee for their indulgence. This has been a very fulsome discussion. I would just say to the committee that we think that the proposal that you see before us best reflects the intent of the official plan from a design perspective. I will note that for the majority, the city only, or city planning staff, after thorough review, only issued some concern with one of the aspects. So I would encourage you to approve this development, approve the variances and the consent.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Hume. I'm going to go on a limb and we're reserving on this to allow for some.
That was
discussion.
expected, Madam
Yeah,
Chair.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much then. Thank you for your patience with us today as well. So
My pleasure, Madam Chair.
all right, thank you. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Looking for anyone who would like to oppose adjourning at this point.